So let's start with organic compounds. First of all, we need to know what an organic compound is. So organic, the term organic means that which is naturally found, which are naturally found in this earth's crust or in this earth, Mother Nature. And all organic compounds has to have the element carbon. Without the carbon being the backbone or the carbon being the main constituent, we cannot call it an organic compound. So apart from carbon, the second most abundant element is hydrogen. And when a compound contains carbon and hydrogen only, we call it an hydro. Jemon, alkenes. These are like families of compounds. Alkanes, alkenes, alcohols are also different families. So whenever an organic compound contains only carbon and hydrogen, we call it a hydrocarbon. So let's take an example of an hydrocarbon. CH4. This is methane. This is an organic compound. And since it only contains carbon and hydrogen, we call it a hydrocarbon. So apart from carbon and hydrogen, organic compounds can also have oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur. We have already studied about sulfur. If you remember from air and water, or even from the last chapter, we know that one of the main causes of acid rain is sulfur. And where do we get this sulfur from? By burning fossil fuel. And what is a fossil fuel? Fossil fuel is a type of organic compound. So organic compounds can have oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, potassium, and there might be a lot of things. But for us, we need to remember the first thing which has to be there is carbon. The second thing which has to be there is hydrogen, then oxygen, and then nitrogen. For us, we need carbohydrates, we need proteins, we need fats. The carbohydrate basically contains three elements, which is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. If you think about fats, it's the same thing. It's carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. But obviously, it's arranged differently. And if we talk about the building blocks of our body, which is protein, it contains carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. So from here, we are being able to identify that carbohydrates, proteins, fats, these are all part of what do you call that? Organic chemistry. These are all hydrocarbons, or these are all organic compounds. So organic compounds are found in all animals and plants. Plastics and many medicines are organic compounds. because the molecules contain carbon atoms. Even leaves and your hair are made up of organic compounds. Next is, not all carbon containing compounds are organic. For example, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and carbonates are not classified as organic compounds. So only compounds which are naturally found, and the major constituent of it is carbon, are classified to be organic compounds. And each organic compounds belong to a certain family, and that family can be of different types, and we call them the homologous series. So homologous series key. Homologous series is basically, it's a group of compounds which has the same chemical properties. আজকে যদি আমরা here we have taken two examples. একটা হলো methane, একটা হলো organic fats or carbohydrates. Although both of them are organic compounds, we cannot say that they are from the same family, or we cannot say that they belong to the same homologous series. So what is an homologous series, or what are the different types of homologous series? There's a long list of homologous series, but for O levels, according to your syllabus, there's 4, but we'll study 6. The examples of homologous series are alkanes, alkenes, alcohols, and carboxylic acid. So আমরা যদি সিরিজটা homologous series can also be compared to different animal breeds. যেমন if we consider the different breeds of dogs, there's Alsatian, there's Doberman, there's Greyhound. How do you classify them? I mean, there's like 5-6 dogs, and you have to classify each of them into different families. How would you differentiate them?
By their features.
By their features, by their certain characteristics.
Sir, phenotype, their physical features.
Let's not go into genotype and phenotype. Let's go just like there's different breeds, and we classify each of them according to some characteristics. Echo, our question is, in order for a compound to belong to a certain homologous series, what are the characteristics we need to take into account? They have to have the same functional group. So after alkane, যদি একটা there's like there are multiple compounds, আমরা কখন জানবো যে these are alkanes? When the compounds will have the same functional group, they'll have similar chemical properties or same chemical properties. So chemical properties মানে কি? Chemical properties is basically the way it reacts, and there's going to be a gradual change in their physical properties. So physical properties কি আমরা already we studied physical properties যেমন melting and boiling point or density. So if we go back to the basics in the bonding chapter, first of all, we need to know that which group of compounds do these organic compounds belong to? Is it ionic compounds? Is it covalent compound, or are they metals?
Covalent.
They're covalent compounds, number 1. Number 2 is, what type of covalent compound? Are they simple covalent or giant covalent?
Simple.
সিম্পল কোভ্যালেন্ট। তাহলে এখন তোমরাই বলো, যদি সিম্পল কোভ্যালেন্ট কম্পাউন্ড হয় তাহলে ওর ক্যারেক্টারিস্টিক্স কি হবে? What do you think, what is their melting point and boiling point? Is it high or low?
Low.
Low. What about their electrical and heat conductivity? Is it high or low?
Low.
Low. Then what about their viscosity? When it changes from a gas to a liquid to a solid, viscosity মানে হলো যে কত thick. If it's very viscous, তার মানে it's very liquidy. It's liquidified. And if it's not viscous, oh sorry, if it's less viscous, তার মানে it cannot flow smoothly. So suppose you have a very dilute liquid, it will easily flow. But if you have a very concentrated liquid, it will not flow very smoothly or very easily. So those are where the physical properties, যেগুলো will then study individually for alkanes, alkenes, alcohols, and carboxylic acid. The chemical properties. Chemical properties is the way they react. Alkanes have different ways of reacting. Alkenes have different ways of reacting. But alkanes cannot react like alkenes. It can never happen. Everybody has their different identity, or they have different ways of reacting with other substances. So we need to remember that each family has their individual characteristics, and only if a compound follows all those characteristics will it be classified under that family. If it does not follow all the characteristics, if it does not follow all the characteristics of that particular family, it cannot be classified under that family or that homologous series. So now let's come to what is a functional group. A functional group is an atom or group of atoms that gives a molecule its characteristic properties. Organic compounds in the same homologous series have similar chemical properties because they have the same functional group. So the most important thing is, if a compound has to be classified, the first thing we need to see is what is its functional group. So functional group কি হতে পারে? As we discussed earlier, it could be an alkane, it could be an alkene, it could be an it could be an alcohol, it could be an carboxylic acid. So what are the different functional groups? So if we talk about alkanes, it has a functional group which is a carbon-carbon single. So any compound who has a carbon-carbon single bond is an, or can be classified as an alkene. Alkenes has a functional group of C double bond C. So compound which has a C double bond C will be classified as an alkene, or it belongs to an alkene family. So let's talk about methane. Let's talk about methane or ethane. Ethane, it's a better example. So ethane is C C H H H H H. So this is an ethane. So ethane, and there's another example which is an ethene. So here we have two compounds with two different names. This is ethane, this is ethene. But now, do they belong to the same family? No,
No.
they do not belong to the same family. Why? Because here, ethane, you have a carbon-carbon single bond. So since it just has a carbon-carbon single bond, it will be classified under the alkane family. Since this compound has a carbon-carbon double bond, you cannot classify this compound under the alkane group or alkane family. It has to be classified under the alkene family. Tell AJ, what are these carbon-carbon single bond and carbon-carbon double bond? These are the functional groups. So whichever compound has a carbon-carbon single bond
is alkene.
is an alkane, or a carbon-hydrogen single bond is an alkane. Whichever compound has a carbon-carbon double bond is an alkene. The criteria of classifying a compound is number one, its functional group. Number two, its chemical properties. And number three, its physical properties. And the chemical properties and the physical properties depends on the functional. This functional group determines what type of reaction the compound will undergo. So ethane belongs to the family alkane. আর alkane কি reaction হবে that we'll study later. আর alkane যে reaction গুলো হবে that will not be undergone by alkenes. আর alkenes এর যে group of reactions হবে that cannot be undergone by alkenes.
Okay.
Okay. Now, so alkenes gelo, তোমাদের alcohols আছে, then you have carboxylic acids. So these are different types of functional groups. So তোমাদের জন্য আমি এক্সট্রা কয়েকটা জিনিস পড়াবো, তাহলে তোমাদের পড়তে একটু ইজিয়ার হবে, which is an alkyl group, and then you have alcohols, then you have halogenoalkanes, and then you have carboxylic acids. So alkyl group ki? Alkyl group alkanes but with one less hydrogen. It's same as alkane but with one less hydrogen. Alcohols.
So the bond is same.
Everything is same.
Okay.
অ্যালকোহলস, এখন যেটা নিয়ে আমাদের এত মাতামাতি, হ্যান্ড স্যানিটাইজার। Have you ever seen what a hand sanitizer is made up of?
Alcohol.
It's made up
70
of,
or 80% alcohol.
yeah. So hand sanitizers are made up of alcohol. Are these this alcohol is basically ethyl alcohol. So ethyl falls under which group?
Alkyl.
Alkyl group. আর অ্যালকোহল ফর্মস আন্ডার অ্যালকোহল গ্রুপ। এখন আমি তো তোমাদেরকে শুধু পড়ালাম যে if a compound has a single bond, it's an alkene. If it has a double bond, it's an alkene. If it has a O and H bond, মানে OH group, then it's an alcohol. But what about all of them coexisting in the same compound? If all of them in the same compound, for example, এরকম, আবার এরকম, and then এরকম, and then we have এরকম. So এখানে we have a single bond, carbon-carbon single bond, we have a carbon-carbon double bond, we have also a OH group. তখন কি? Which family does this compound belong to?
Sir, is it alkanes?
No. So in order to decide which group would this compound belong to, we need to learn about something known as hierarchy. Hierarchy হলো কার প্রেফারেন্স বেশি। So এখানে we have three groups. Out of these three groups, the most powerful is alcohol. মানে in the hierarchy. So army-তে there's like ranks. There's like a major, then there's lieutenant colonel, then there's colonel, then brigadier, then general. If in case of doctors, there's a medical officer, then you have a junior consultant, senior consultant, then you have assistant professor, associate professor, professor. So there's like a hierarchy, right? If there's like a government of, if you're like a government officer, নিচের ranks গুলো অনেক কিছু vary করে। So let's start from joint secretary, then you have additional secretary, then you have secretary, the highest rank. So এখানেও there are like these are like, you have a hierarchy, and in that hierarchy alcohol is more powerful than alkene, and alkene is more powerful than alkanes. So this compound, since this compound has an alcohol, and alcohol is overpowering, or it is more powerful than the other two functional groups, so this compound belongs to the alcohol family. So functional groups are basically, it's a atom or group of atoms which gives the identity to a compound. So if a compound has single carbon-carbon bonds, then that compound is classified as alkenes. If it has a carbon-carbon double bond, that will be classified as an alkene. If it has a carbon attached to a OH group or hydroxy group, we call them, or we classify them as an alcohol group. And if all of them coexist in the same compound, then only there's a hierarchy chart, যেটা আমরা পরে পড়ব when there's like at the end of the chapter, who is more powerful than who. But for now, if you understand that if a compound has a carbon-carbon single bond or a carbon-hydrogen single bond, it would belong to an alkane. If it has a carbon-carbon double bond, it will belong to an alkene. If it has a carbon bonded to a hydroxy group or a OH group, then it will be classified as an alcohol. If a carbon is bonded to a halogen, so halogen X could be fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine. So if a carbon is bonded to any of the halogen atoms, if a carbon is bonded to any of the halogen atoms, we call it a halogenoalkene. We call it a halogenoalkene. And eventually, we have carboxylic acid. Carboxylic acid is a carbon has to be bonded to oxygen, and then this carbon also has to be bonded to OH group. This in total is known as the carboxylic acid. So alkane is carbon-carbon single bond. Alkyl is just like alkanes, but with one less hydrogen. Alkenes is carbon-carbon double bond. Halogenoalkane is carbon with a halogen, bromine or iodine or anything. And carboxylic acid. Carboxylic acid is if a compound contains a COOH. Alkyl is just like alkane, but with one less hydrogen. যেমন alkane is CH4. Alkane is CH4. CH4 is methane. আর এটা থেকে তুমি যদি একটা হাইড্রোজেন সরায় দাও তাহলে কি হবে? It's going to become CH3. So CH3 is an alkyl group.